So anyway, I just wanted to start off and just look into this title a little bit. And the title says AI's message to consultants and strategy leaders. Based on what I saw, it looks like we've got consultants, we've got strategy leaders, and we also have some academics and some other practitioners out there. So hopefully we can check all the boxes for you guys. But this is really a discussion around AI, and it's and AI's message that says, hey, if we really want to, we have a place in this world of AI. Now, that doesn't mean the world's going to be exactly the way it is today, because I do anticipate, and we'll talk about this, I do anticipate that the AI is going to change fundamentally how we do strategy for the better. The question is, are you or are we, am I willing to adapt to this? And that's what we're going to go through today. So let's just go ahead and start out and begin with the end in mind. I hope that at the end of this, that each of you will have some level of understanding about the evolution and changing landscape of strategic planning and execution. Now, we could say strategic planning, but I put the execution in there too, because a plan is irrelevant without a good systematic connected process for implementation. Secondly, contemplate, be considering how the use of AI can improve strategic planning. Now, I assume everybody in here on this call is focused on strategic planning. So how can we use AI to make our jobs and our impact better? So that's the consideration here. And then the other thing is how do we adopt this technology? What can we actually do? What are the things that we can do now in order to enhance our impact on our organizations, our employees, our customers, and our communities using this thing called AI? So we have big plans. So we've got 4 parts we're going to go through. The first part is really just going through a brief history of strategy, how we got where we are today. How did we get here? The next thing is what about where we are now? Are we going to continue the way we've been going with really slow incremental change in this space that we call strategic planning, or are we facing a quantum leap in capabilities? Obviously, you know where I'm going with that. And then how does artificial intelligence play in this? And then where is strategy going? What is strategy going to be doing in the future? And that's going to be a real fun conversation where we start looking at that. What can strategy do given the ability of AI? So let's start out with the history of strategy. So if we go back, strategy really comes from war, and early on, the first most notable book is the Sun Tzu book, The Art of War. The highest form of warfare is defeating the enemy without fighting. And that's I look at this in the art. The art of war is really strategy. And that's looking at this and saying, how can we do something better? Historically, war was about just he who has the most people wins, right? Napoleon type strategic plan was basically, if I have more people, I win. And then we started seeing a little bit more deception as Machiavelli comes in here. We know Machiavelli for being different, but really what Machiavelli focused on was war. And he said, never attempt to win by force that which can be won by deception. And if you think about it, that's what strategy is. There's a level of deception. I want to do something that somebody else isn't doing in order to get ahead. Corporately, within our organizations. Now, we can learn from others, but there's a level of, hey, how do we do something different? And then Karl von Clausewitz comes out with no plan survives the first contact with the enemy. And just to interpret that, I relate that to this slide right here. We all know Mike Tyson. I heard yesterday that he's getting back in the ring. So I don't have a survey here, but I wonder how much they would pay somebody to get in the ring with Mike Tyson, even though he's 58 years old. They couldn't pay me enough. But really, he said this, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face or the mouth, right? And that's this whole essence. If we look at that, that's the whole idea, is like, we can come up with the greatest plan and then something externally completely turns it upside down. So the idea of having an agile methodology for implementation of that plan is key. So and this will all come back to AI. So then we go back and look at the origins of strategy, and really this term strategic planning as a trade or something we did came out of the 60s, in business. And it was really, I think, I'm going to guess it came from the consulting side. Consulting gets a hold of it because there's significant money in it. On the consulting side, academia gets a hold of it, and then it's in business. And now we have this triage of creating strategic planning. Strategic planning roles became fairly prestigious roles, and that's where it really came in the 60s. And then in the 70s, we started seeing some matrix or some frameworks evolve. Some specific frameworks. We're familiar with the BCG metrics. That's coined the term cash cow. We all know that one. We've seen scenario planning. Quarters 5 came towards the end of that decade, but we start seeing frameworks. One that was making things easier for people to build strategies so that they can enhance their effectiveness. Later on, over the next several years, we had several other frameworks pop up here that really give us the ability to start following something so that we can do strategy better. On a personal note, my background related to strategy. I graduated, I put the years there, and now some of you guys are doing the math, and I know I'm completely surprising you with my age, but I apologize for that. In 1989, I was an undergrad, and I took the capstone strategy course, and it was fun. We had the group stuff, and we did case studies. I did CSX as our primary case study, the old railroad company, right? Later on, I went back to school and did essentially the same thing as a grad, and we did not really pretty much the same classes I did as an undergrad with different people. In 2000, I started a group in a division of Marriott where we focused on strategic planning and placing our resorts in strategic locations and looking at how they were connecting to the company's mission and so forth. 2008 is when I went out on my own. And I started doing strategy consulting, mostly in the resort space. But then it was about 2012, and I put this in red. I started teaching strategic planning at the undergraduate level at CSU, Colorado State University. And I was really excited. I was like, hey, I'm gonna learn so much about strategy because I've been practicing strategy for a while, and it's been quite a while since I had been in the academic setting. And I went back in and I said, wow, I looked at some of the syllabi from the professors, and I was like, hasn't been a lot of change here. And I apologize for some professors on the line here and the academic side, but I was surprised that the general concept within the class hadn't changed much. I think the greatest change is we went away from those plastic little overheads. You remember those? So those that nod will be aging themselves, and we replaced that with PowerPoint, right? I know you're not that old, Chip. So, but that was essentially in 2012 when I started teaching. There wasn't dramatic growth in strategic planning. Now I knew that because in the corporate side, I was generally like, "There's got to be a better way," and I was running strategy. There's got to be a better way. So then when I started teaching, I was like, "Man, I'm going to find what that better way was," and unfortunately, I didn't find it. And I followed the typical strategic planning class for about one semester, and then I completely changed it. Around 2015 is when I took what I had suspected and really built a strategic planning systematic process that looked at strategic analysis, strategic focus, strategic outcomes, strategic actions, and how do we integrate this with a human perspective within organizations. And that really evolved into Blendification. And Blendification historically has been an organization that we did workshops, traditional consulting, and we worked with the top tiers of the organization, and we charged, a little bit of money for that. And but I was always concerned that we weren't touching the people throughout the organization. Technology gave us the ability to do that, and AI has taken it to a completely different level, which we'll talk about. So, and that's where we are today. It's like we're at an interesting point here. So we go part 2 here into the quantum leap phase, and that's today. Where are we? Like, what is going on in strategic planning? And as we tend to look backwards at what people have done for strategic planning, we need to start looking forwards and seeing how strategic planning can play a much more significant role in the business. And if you ask me, and I'm biased, but I don't think there's a better way to help an organization succeed by helping its employees, customers, and community than using strategic planning and the tools that exist today to do that. So many of you know this. And if we look back over time and we look at, and this is just a real simple explanation. And this is my interpretation that from really the 60s, 70s, all the way up into today, we've experienced relatively modest change or incremental change in strategic planning capabilities, right? So this isn't about your ability to help strategic planning. This is the actual tools that we have. And then today, everything's just squiggly, right? It's just like, what's going on? And if we're not asking ourselves the question today, right here, right now, what does the future look like in our space? We need to be, and that's what we're here today to talk about. We need to be thinking that things are going to change. And the role of strategic planning has a much greater importance going into the future. And I'll share more as we go through this. So if we look at this idea, quantum leap, I was talking to Brian, who's on the call today. I was talking to him this morning, and he mentioned the use of words. And sometimes we throw out words or phrases, and we don't really have any meaning behind them. So, but we look at, I say we're at a point of quantum leap in our profession, strategic planning. Quantum leap. So what does that mean? And a significant, and I put this down here, a significant and often sudden advance or change. And I think that's where we are. And I just pause for a second and breathe, because we need to be looking at where we're sitting right now, right here, looking into the future, saying the world in our space has the potential to be quite different than it was. And I say this in the context of business leaders, how we plan and execute, the role of strategy inside organizations. I say that inside of universities, planning and executing inside universities, taking it into the classroom, how we teach students should be completely different than it has been, because we have the technology. I sound like, what's that, the $6 million man, right? We have the ability to do things that I think intuitively we all wanted to do, but we weren't able to do it. I've seen some associations are on here too. So there's people here from associations. So we're just at this point. So now let's define this a little further incrementally. What am I talking about? Historically, strategy has been a very manual process, meaning that we create a rigid plan. It's like, we got to be focused on what the plan is. I'm not underestimating that or devaluing that, but this is what we've done historically. The C-suite or the exec team was typically the ones that were smart enough, the executive elite. I don't want to be condescending. I wrote about this in my book, by the way. The executive elite were the ones that basically were the ones that built strategy. And then they took that and they said, this is where we're going. And they shared that direction with everybody else in the organization. So it was more sharing the direction. And it was essentially a top-down type model. I'm not saying every organization works this way, but generally speaking, this is the model, the manual model that existed and still exists today. So now we look at, where does this go? And just taking those same 4 points and looking at what this means from a digital side. And this means that we have the ability to create and implement an agile plan. Quick changes that we weren't used to. That doesn't mean we change our long-term direction, our outcomes, or our strategic focus. It means we have the ability to change our strategic actions. In the context of technology, in this flip where we are now, the whole team can be involved. And I'm saying everybody, like you hired somebody yesterday at $20 an hour, they can now be part of your strategic planning process. And what we do create through this is not executives sharing a direction. We create a shared direction. And then we don't have top-down accountability. We have peer responsibility. So these are all things that we can do with technology today that we couldn't do a year ago, truthfully. We couldn't do this a year ago. So that's what I mean by exponential changes. Now, some of you might have been doing these things, and you might be doing them now, which is awesome. I would say be open to how technology can actually foster that and make that better. And we're going to go through some specific examples. So if I look at it right now, here we are today. We're kind of at this beginning of this spaghetti mix right now, and then it's gonna kind of go crazy for the next year or two in our space, and kind of, I think, for a lot of people's space, if we're open to that. So we're just going to be in this space, and the question is why? And clearly, it's because artificial intelligence. Now, I was meeting with somebody yesterday, and he was comparing artificial intelligence, AI, and I'm speaking about generative AI, he was comparing it more to crypto. And I still haven't figured out a personal use of crypto for me. Some of you might have. But I know there's specific use cases for generative AI for virtually every job out there that will dramatically increase not only our productivity, but our connectivity. And I'll get into that here in a second. So we have tremendous opportunity. So this is about the only time I'm going to spend time talking about general use or general case for AI. This is what we know AI or generative AI. This is about a year ago, or more. We could go back and look. We would type something in Google, and Google was unbelievably smart. It could actually fill in the blanks for us. And that's essentially the predictive intelligence, generative AI. It was taking what we said and then filling in the next 2 or 3 words. And it was actually pretty fantastic. And that's kind of old school. But what now? We take that same statement and we put it into ChatGPT and we say, what should bankers be prepared for relative to AI technology? Just that little sentence generates basically this type of response. So this is a leap in information that we have available to us. And many of you have used ChatGPT. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But that's essentially what generative AI is. For those that were saying, what's the difference? Because we have AI in a lot of different areas. Now let's look at the specific use case around artificial intelligence and strategy. So oddly enough, artificial intelligence and strategy is the thing that's going to give us the ability to really connect a lot of dots in our organization. Now, from here on, we're going to be talking about a specific use case of AI in strategy. So many of you have probably been to various different AI panels, discussions, conferences, and generally what happens is everybody starts smiling and talking about how AI just planned my vacation to Colorado. Isn't that cool? Or if you're from Colorado to Mexico. And AI is really, really good at that. And I say AI, ChatGPT can plan your vacation. And we go, wow, that's pretty cool. And then we walk away going, but how do I use it in my job? And I'm leading strategic planning. How does it help me? So from here on out, we're going to talk about specifically the use case of strategy, AI in strategy. So with that, we're going to use a company that many of you have probably experienced, Southwest Airlines. Now, this is not a strategic plan for Southwest. I just like Southwest Airlines. I think they're a cool company, so I figured I'd use them as an example. So I'm going to use Southwest Airlines as an example. This is not a real case. Everything in here I have to qualify is not people that I've talked to at Southwest. But I'm going to take you through a process using various different frameworks, enhancing the output with AI. So we're going to start using generative AI, ChatGPT. So here's what we're doing here, just a little context. I'm going into my system here and I'm finding 9 documents, 9 reports that represent about 400 pages, multiple different file types. I'm dragging them and I'm dropping them into ChatGPT. So now I have all of this information. This becomes a mini database. This is a record or a history or information on the company. And then I take that and I create a prompt or directions. And in this case, I said, hey, ChatGPT, I want you to summarize based on those documents, the culture. I want you to identify 5 external impacts to the organization and 3 areas of strategic focus. So just in that time, we did that. AI or your ChatGPT was reading all of that information and then summarize it. So what just happened? So think about that. 400 pages of documents were reviewed, summarizing it in 250 words. That prompt response or that output was 250 words. And it summarized the company's culture, external factors, and 3 strategic focus areas. And it did it in less than 1 minute. So some of us are familiar with ChatGPT. Most of us are. And we see ChatGPT as a tool where we ask ChatGPT questions. ChatGPT then goes out to this universe of information called a large language model and then answers the questions. What I just did is actually different than that. I fed ChatGPT internal specific reports and information, and a lot of it. And then I asked ChatGPT to answer questions that I wanted specifically about that information without bringing in external information from the large language model. So that's a unique use case here that many of us don't know, that you can do that right now. And it's pretty efficient. So if you are going into a strategy retreat and you have reports, you can start creating summaries of those reports based on your directions. And by the way, it's unbiased. So like if the CEO wrote one thing and then the director of marketing wrote something, it doesn't say, oh, ChatGPT doesn't say, oh, I need to give 10 extra points for the CEO. It's completely unbiased. It looks for dominant themes. So that's one specific use case. So let's take this into the strategy side here a step further. Many of you do SWOTs. And looking at this, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to ask ChatGPT to use that same information, those same reports, and develop a SWOT for Southwest Airlines. So it's going to go back and speed read all of those files a lot quicker than I can read. And it's going to find out the specific information that relates to or can be translated into a SWOT for Southwest Airlines. Now, any of us could go say, go to ChatGPT and say, generate a SWOT for us. And it will do that because there's plenty of information out there in the large language model on Southwest Airlines. But what this did is this looked at those specific files. So you may be working for an organization that doesn't have a lot of external information about it. So you can load that information in there and say, based on this information, tell me what else, give me an example of a SWOT. And it does it just like that. So let's take it a step further. Porter's 5 forces. I know mostly the academics like Porter's 5. So if you're an academic, you're probably smiling right now because it is pretty cool. It's not used as much in practice, but it is definitely is used in the large consulting companies and in academics. But let's see if ChatGPT can do the same thing. So here's the direction here. So I'm going to give this direction and essentially a prompt. We've all heard that, a prompt, and it says specifically, give me a Porter's 5 for Southwest Airlines based on that information. Now, I don't even know what was in that information, but it's able to look at that and read it. So those are those same 9 files, right? And it generates a full Porter's 5. You see the last one there, the intensity of competitive rivalry. So it does that. Now, I could also go back in and ask it follow-up questions to say, well, tell me a little bit more about this and that, and go deeper and deeper. So that's the Porter 5. Essentially, what we're doing here is taking a framework, applying internal data, and saying, give us the output based on this framework. And that's available right now. So now let's take it to another example here, a balanced scorecard. I think there's some folks on here that used a balanced scorecard in their practice. And we can take those same 9 files, and this could be 20 files. It could be a lot of information. Taking that same data and say, hey, let me give you a prompt. Give me basically prepare the balanced scorecard for Southwest Airlines based on these files. And nice enough, ChatGPT in this case decided to give us 2 responses. And we'll go ahead and we'll click on one and just check one right here. And now what we're doing here, what it's doing is it's generating a specific balanced scorecard with some data. And you might say, well, that's kind of high level. It's your responsibility to say, give me more, and specifically what I'm looking for is this. In this case, what I did is I said, hey, give me 10 KPIs, or give me KPIs for the customer from the customer perspective. And it did that. It gave me those KPIs. Now I look at these KPIs and I say, well, they don't have any dates, nor do they have any numbers. If those numbers existed inside that data, I could do another follow-up question and say, well, go ahead and put these in a SMART goal format for me. And it would do that. So this is all the stuff that you can do. So now we're making progress in generating a specific strategic direction for the organization with supporting KPIs using ChatGPT almost off the shelf. I say it's not, it's a $20 fee. This is the premium version of ChatGPT. I don't think it's available for free yet, but I think that would be worth $20 a month. So keeping with that, what just happened, ChatGPT read 400 pages multiple times. I just shared, 3 frameworks for you there? 3 frameworks in the matter of this time where it built the SWOT It built Porter's 5 and it built the balanced scorecard. We could put anything in there. It has the intelligence to take these frameworks using the data we feed it and create whatever we ask it to do. And it did it, really in less than 15 minutes. Now, is that meant to be your final strategy or your final document? No, but it does a good job informing us, and that's what we're really looking for here. So, summary on this section here. So, a lot of data and information, not just externally, but internal documents can be used to help us make better decisions by just really click, drag, and ask questions, right? It has the ability to summarize internal and external information based on what we want it to do. And it can interpret that into various different frameworks. And if we like, and we should, if we want to go deeper, it can answer those questions using the content of data that we supplied it. So, or we can just go out to ChatGPT and ask it various different things. But ultimately, what we're doing is we're able to customize this stuff based on our internal documents. So we have a little bit of time here, so I'm going to pause it for a second. I've got another section, but I am going to actually open it up for questions for anybody that has just a few questions. I think we can answer a couple questions here based on what we just talked about. Is anybody dying to ask a question?
So we do have one question here. It says, this method promotes a less intimate understanding of themes and context. How do you mitigate this?
I think I would answer that with a follow-up question. And whoever wrote that, would that be an intimate because we're not having a conversation to source this information? Is that where the lack of intimacy comes?
And I'll go ahead and invite Meg maybe to unmute and if she wants to engage.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dan. And Chip, yeah, no, I'm just wondering, like, you're not, it sounds like you're not reading those 400 pages yourself. Maybe you are. Maybe you recommend still doing that. I was just wondering, if you're relying on ChatGPT to do it. We all know that, reading materials yourself, you get a better idea than just reading a summary of it. And then also knowing that ChatGPT generates slight variations in the results when you rerun the information. So I'm just wondering, how do you know that's what's being generated is the best material?
Yeah, a couple points there. One, should we read that information? That's really a personal choice, I think, for those that would want to do that. I probably wouldn't read all that data, but that would be me. And because it would take me a long time. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody shouldn't. I would probably scan it, and truthfully, that's what I used to do anyway. I didn't read all of that stuff. That's 9 reports. I would scan it looking for various different things that I could relate to that seemed to stick out. So that's one point. I think that's an individual question. Clearly, Meg, I agree with you. The more we read, the better off we are. But there's so much information, it's difficult to actually do that and really stay up. The other point was, let's see. So the second part of the question, help me out, Meg. One more. The second part of that question.
Sure. Yeah, it's just that when you rerun something in ChatGPT, it generates something slightly different. And so, how do you know what you're getting is?
Yeah. So I relate that to ChatGPT is, I look at it as a human being. So Meg, if I asked you a question, and you read all 400 of those pages, and I said, Meg, tell me a little bit about the SWOT analysis. And then 5 minutes later, I asked you the same question. You would answer it differently, but conceptually, it would be virtually the same answer. Mostly, it wouldn't be word for word. So my recommendation would be is to run questions a few different times, get different perspectives from ChatGPT, because you can put on different personas and say, I'm looking at running a strategic planning retreat, give me a SWOT, or look at this through the lens of the CEO, or look at this through the lens of somebody else. But I think on your end, I do run AI various different times. The answers are mostly the same. It might use different words in the process, but it's essentially the same general answer across the board. But that doesn't exclude us from actually asking the questions over and over to see what the answers are. So thanks, Meg. Good question. Anything else popping up?
It looks like Brian's got his hand up here, but we do have two questions here. So same flavor, so I'll blend them together here. But what we need to be careful about uploading proprietary documents to ChatGPT. What do we need to be aware of when we're utilizing tools like ChatGPT and feeding it our organization's proprietary information? You know, how do we handle that?
That's another personal decision, because clearly you're putting your information out there. Now, if you look at the usage requirements, ChatGPT does state that they do not use your information. So if you trust them on that, then you can upload your information. If you don't trust them, then obviously don't do that. There's also third-party tools that exist that mimic exactly what I did at a larger scale. There's a company that I met with last week. I think they're out of the DC area. I forget their name, but they're doing essentially the same thing for those that want to keep that don't want to jeopardize that information. They're creating their own basic corpus. And that doesn't share. Now they have to use artificial intelligence or generative AI to process that information. But again, with the open AI, there's a commitment that they're not going to be using your data. It's up to you whether or not you trust that. There are alternative products that cost more money that can be used.
Got it. Thanks. It looks like Brian's got his hand up here.
Yeah, thanks, Chip. Dan, so thank you for that presentation. I want to get back to the exponential change. It sounds like what you're envisioning is that with the enablement of these AI tools, kind of like having power tools in the hands of a skilled carpenter, there would be a dramatic change in workflow process where I think I see a comment in here, or at least a question about how that might be a yes and, where is this something where a side-by-side or side saddle sort of relationship where the practitioner, the strategic planner or consultant sits with clients, and because they know how to prompt engineer, can suss out the right kind of data from across a broad collection of materials, as opposed to assume that ChatGPT is just going to replace the consultant or to help hidden behind the scenes and go into the final report that gets thrown over the fence at the end. Would you kind of help articulate your vision a little more around that, and maybe blendification?
Yes. So first off, I paused in the middle of this to answer questions. I still have another series of slides I want to go through that talks about the next wave. But I thought it was good to just break up my monotone voice and answer a few questions here. So we'll jump back into that in a second here. But to answer your question, I don't believe wholeheartedly that AI will replace good consultants. I do believe that AI will replace a lot of the things that consultants do, that they're not as efficient at it, like data collection and data analysis. You mentioned, Brian, the process. So now when we have tremendously enhanced data collection techniques, tremendously improved data analysis that's super rapid, then our process that supports that strategy execution needs to adapt to a very agile world where information can be obtained and processed. And so we can adapt our plans based on things very, very rapidly. So one thing you said in there is the process behind this. I see a tremendous opportunity to change how we're actually executing strategy. Clearly, there's an element of strategic planning, but this is all about how do we do things better on strategy execution, because we have access to information that is much more information, and it can be synthesized so much more quickly. So yes, the process should change, and we should be at the forefront of changing that process and adapting to it. So I'm going to jump back into the presentation here. Can I do that? And we'll go forward here. And the next wave, and the next wave side of this for strategy is a little bit different, because we know strategy as a process where we create a plan, and then hopefully we do a good job in getting that plan into the hands of the right people so they execute on it, and we monitor and we have control mechanisms and such. That, based on what I just shared with you with AI, and this isn't everything, but just with the AI components here, it's pretty clear that AI has the ability to improve analysis, summarization, and synthesis of data and reports at a level that we've never been able to do it before. And that leads to tremendously enhanced productivity. So from a strategic planning perspective, my ability to plan has been enhanced productivity wise. I can do it in less time and at a lower cost, based on what we've done before. So that's kind of a win, I think. It may not be a win for the huge consulting companies because the more time, the more we can charge. But we can do a lot more, a lot quicker. But that's not what I'm talking about relative to the next wave. That's just purely an enhancement in productivity. I think, and I alluded to this earlier on, I think that strategy has the capability now and the ability to be a platform that improves connectivity within the organization. So if we look back philosophically, what has happened to companies and organizations over the past few years is we were able to maintain some level of productivity, but we lost our ability to be productive, and we watched employee engagement drop. So really the problem we're trying to solve with strategic planning and execution is not to become merely more productive. There's plenty of productivity tools out there. What we're really seeking in the future is strategic planning moving up to the front of the line in terms of creating a community, creating fulfillment, creating connection. Because when I build something as an employee, I'm more interested in what it looks like when it's completed. So just hang with me here. I see this as the problem we're solving, not becoming more productive. What I shared with you was productivity. Where we're going is greater connectivity. And we crack this code as strategic planners within organizations. We now have a super efficient, rewarding, fulfilling, and inclusive organization if we're able to crack this code, and technology gives us the ability to do that. So I'm just setting the table of where we're going here. And it's really about looking at giving everyone in the organization a voice. So if you look at this little diagram here, so on the left is a bunch of people, giving them a voice, and that actually impacts the organization's future. And when we do that, we start creating greater connectivity when we give people meaning in their jobs. And that is the thing that's lacking with all these technologically based productivity tools, is people have lacked meaning and connection. But strategy and you as a leader in your organization can be the catalyst or the person that brings this all together, given technology. So now I'm going to go into a different process here. Similar way, similar structure as what I just did, but we're going to go in and use this thing called First National Bank. This is a fictitious company. I had ChatGPT develop this logo, and now I'm going to go through a series of examples. In the background, there's going to be examples of how generative AI is being used to create greater inclusion, involvement, and participation throughout an organization in the process of strategic planning, so that they have greater ownership in the outcome and the execution of what that is, so that we as individuals within an organization view our company as a place where we can fulfill our dreams as a human being. And that is the essence of what we're talking about, is because we need to be laser focused on helping our people become more attached to the organization. And what better way to do that than making them part of the plan and then part of the execution of that plan. So I'm going to start with this. So this is a specific strategic planning application using generative AI. This is not ChatGPT. This is a specific application that is outside of everything I just showed you. And this is where AI conducts dynamic strategy interviews with employees. So when I say dynamic, I'm going to talk about that here for a second. This is just going to run in the background here. So we call it a strategy 360. And what happens is the AI now is taking the person's name and their role and formulating a conversation questions. And it's going to ask questions around the foundation, internal, external culture, customer, product, operations, and people. It's going to ask a bunch of questions. Now, these questions aren't pre-made, it's dynamic. The AI has a role, or it's been guided to ask a series of questions to come up with certain different answers, but not the specific answers. So if you look at this AI is basically asking questions on product here, and the questions that it asks you is different than the question it asks somebody else. It's based on your interview, and you develop basically a interview platform or text that the AI engages you with. So we're going through this pretty quickly here. This is the full log of an interview with a human being that the AI facilitated dynamically. The person can ask questions of the AI, say, I don't know, and so forth. It then creates a summary. There's roughly 5,000 words in this interview. It then takes all of these interviews, and you can take each individual interview. So look at this as an entire company's worth of interviews and puts them into a framework and say, here's what this person said about all of these categories. We call them blocks. Here's what this person said based on an interview. Now, this interview is probably an hour, hour and a half, so it's a substantial interview. But what we're doing is we can take everyone in the organization. I could send out an email at 9 o'clock in the morning and say, by 5 o'clock today, I want you to have completed this interview. And it's a strategy interview. I want your opinion on where you think the organization should go. And by 5 o'clock in the afternoon, assuming everybody in the organization does it, I have a huge amount of information. And, if that's 50 people in an organization. So think about that. The AI can lead a 360 interview of 5,000 words or 15 pages. Each one of these 5,000 words, 15 pages. It can then take that information and adapt it into, or analyze that, and take that and adapt it into a framework. And it can do this really quickly. So now, could a consultant do this? If you had 1,000 employees, could you have an army of consultants go out in one day, capture and process all this information? The answer is no, right? Could it be done in a week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, a year? Probably a year, but how much is that going to cost? So think about the power of what this did. Now, somebody might be going, well, gosh, what's my role as a consultant in this world if the AI can do this stuff? And the answer, in my opinion, is it makes your job better. And that's what I mean, is you have a place, it makes your job better, because now you can go out and get all of this information from various different people that never had a voice. And you can collect that and process it more rapidly than you've ever done before. So now you're giving everybody a voice. And your role is now you have more informed information to make better decisions with the executive leadership team. So that's what we're doing there. So let me just take it a step further. Again, there is 5,000 words, let's say 50 employees, 250,000 words or 750 pages of interview content. So what do we do with that? So now we have all this information. We have all these individual interviews that represent a lot of data, a lot of information that is really gold, if you ask me, because we've never really tapped into this source of information. We've tapped into industry sources. We've tapped in internal reports. We've tapped into the minds of the executives, but we very seldom dynamically tap into the minds of the people. Now, we've done Likert scales assessments. We've done questionnaires, but our goal in those questionnaires are to ask, 5 or 6 questions. It's not a dynamic interview that really adapts to that person's specific answers. So we've done some of these things, but we haven't had the ability to really do all of this stuff in one. So now what do we do with this information? The AI analyzes this and synthesizes these interviews essentially into a strategic plan. So what we're going to do now is show you a strategic plan that was built by all of the employees. There's been no human engagement or involvement, all automated. This is not meant to be the strategic plan, but it's meant to inform the leadership team. So it takes that, and we use this thing called the strategy whiteboard framework, and it's a comprehensive model for strategic planning. So here it took all of the words that they said and processed the company's culture. What do they think the company's culture is? What do they think the external impacts are? What's the internal strengths and weaknesses within the organization? What's going on from a strategic foundation, foundational strategy, unifying objective, core competencies? Now, no human involvement. It's just synthesizing the data from these interviews and creating this strategic platform. And it's a comprehensive platform. Now it goes in and builds strategic focus and outcomes for a customer-focused statement, clear strategic outcomes. We went through this a little bit in the balanced scorecard KPI discussion. Product focus, product outcomes. And it's building all of this based on these interviews. It's a pretty interesting tool when you look at this and the capabilities of the head start it gives us when we're leading a strategy implementation. So just think about that for a second. It didn't stop with just the interview. It converted the interview into information that we can use as leaders of organizations to start helping build a better organization or lead strategy retreats. So, it analyzed, summarized, and synthesized the data. It adapted it into a framework. It conducted its own strategic analysis and focus. It developed SMART goals, all from this stuff. But again, this is not meant to be the final plan. It's just meant to inform the plan, right? So another example here is looking at this from a strategy consultant. Can AI give us some basic level of information? So what happens if I'm going through a process and I'm going through an interview or I'm meeting as a team and I don't really understand something? Can AI actually act as a supportive consultant or a strategy analyst to help answer questions? And that's what goes on over here is a little bot that you can just basically ask questions, and it says, hey, I'm Fusion, blah, blah, blah. What is a strategic outcome? Never heard that term before. So you ask that question and it provides an answer. And this goes back into a corpus of information. That's not good enough. Give me an example of what a strategic outcome is for a bank, right? So now it gives me a specific outcome under the customer and market focus lens. What is a core competency statement? So you start asking these questions and it's going to give you answers. So it plays the role of kind of like a basic level of a strategy consultant. Give me 2 examples of core competency statements right here. And it will, but unfortunately, it's not the ones we wanted. It's just an example. So we can follow that up and say, give me an example of one for a bank, a specific example, and it will do this. So again, we're driving the ship here as leaders. Now we have access to this tremendous amount of information. So, so AI can play a pretty interesting role there. So just to summarize this phase here, the AI played the role of a strategy consultant that answered questions and provided specific examples based on the user's needs. So now we start putting all this together, and the AI can generate and capture information that we never were able to access before. Employees, probably the most significant and meaningful source of information that exists within any organization is what's sitting in the heads of the employees. It then went out and processed all that, summarized that, and then placed it into an operational type strategic plan that can be used to inform better decisions by the leadership team. And it's doing this very rapidly. So, so that's generally where we are. And let's just look at this. I'm getting close to the end here, but let's look at this in the context of how we used to do things. And this is general. Your system might be different. I'm not here to say this is your model, but these are 2 different examples. A large company example and a mid-sized company or organization. A large company, and you might have been part of these, that where strategy takes like 9 months to build. I've been part of these. It's interesting, but there wasn't a better way either, right? So you do a kickoff, you conduct some research, maybe the strategies, maybe there's executives that are interviewed, say 15 of them. There's a period of time where you're doing data analysis and synthesis. There's strategy prep, more executive discussions, and then you come up with a final strategy, and now you're ready to start executing, and that's a 9-month process. And this is, I'm talking about big time, major corporations using one of the large global consulting companies. There's a lot going on in there. I'm not trying to discount what that is, but this is a basic timeline, and then they start execution. Let's just hope that on month 8, the world didn't change. Maybe like a COVID came out or something, and they were rolling out their strategy in April of 2020, and they just spent 7 months, 8 months building a strategy that wasn't related to the new world. That would be bad, right? Let's look at a mid-sized company. Kickoff, interview smaller number of people, less time. You prepare for a meeting, you go out on a strategy retreat, 1, 2, 3 days, so forth, finalize strategy. So maybe that's 2 months, that process. So now in this context, we've done a basic system for strategic planning. That might not be yours. They're just examples. But what can we do today when we have AI coming in here? So you can actually do a kickoff, do some research, interview hundreds of people. So if you look at the other ones, human beings, we can't interview a lot of people. The more people we interview, the more information we have to analyze. So now we actually start interviewing these people using AI. Maybe that takes a week because we want to give them a chance to find time to do this. The data analysis and synthesis phase, so a day at most, right? A day. Meeting prep's already in there because we've already put it into the format that we're going to run the meeting by. So then we plan a strategy retreat. We go off site for a couple days, and now we have a finalized strategy and we begin execution. And that process takes probably 2 weeks. So think about how this can impact your organization. And it's just technologically enabled. Now let's look at the psychology of this. We've included more people in the process. They now feel like they have a meaning within this organization because you ask them their opinion. So they're going to be interested to see what comes out at the end. So now once they're involved in that, they're like, hey, tell me what I can do. And now you have the opportunity as a leader to start giving people things to do, executing the strategy because they were involved at the beginning. And that goes into that whole idea around more of a shared model. And it starts at the beginning and it ends up going on through perpetuity. So we look at this, the benefits to an organization using AI, and hopefully you're starting to see that quantum leap that I talked about. For those that are on the academic side, there's also tremendous application in the classroom in a typical traditional strategic planning process to throw away any of the use of case studies. So I'll go back to my academic side here. And one of the things I threw away in my third semester was case studies. I never did another case study again. I used real companies. I had real companies go through this process, and I had the students lead the process with the executive team. This is pre-AI. Just think what we can do with AI now. So literally creating, putting the students in real situations, working with real executive teams. I stopped using case studies when one of the case studies was Samsung, and my students said, we're recommending they go to the moon. And we all smiled and we giggled. And I said, that is not what we want to have. That's not what we should be teaching at universities. And I failed them, and I said, I've got to change. That was the last time I ever used a case study because there was no accountability. There was nobody that they had to prepare for, and they were just being creative. When I put them into a group that they had to answer to the executive team, it changed everything. So academics, if you're in the academic side, tremendous opportunity in the classroom. Obviously organizationally. So benefits to the organization: less time, less money, greater participation, shared direction. We've gone over all these things. Pure accountability. I didn't even get into the use of AI in terms of facilitating strategy execution. We don't have time for that. That's a whole other webinars. Using AI in a collaborative fashion to create input on our strategic actions. It's amazing. Not even going there today. Better planning and informed decisions. So you as a strategic leader, this is the time for you to step up, adapt new technology, whether it be ChatGPT or something else. Adopt and learn about these new technologies so you can be a real leader in not just strategy development in your organization, but creating connectivity within your organization. And I think that's the new role of a strategy leader. You're almost an HR person because you're the mechanism behind creating connectivity within an organization. So that's where I see the strategy leader in the future, if we so choose to adapt. And here's just a list of things that I think we should do. So with that, I'm going to close it out and open it up for questions as we close this out. And Tom, how much time do we have?
We're good for another 15 or 20 minutes.
Okay, that's good. I actually thought this was an hour, so that's why I stopped and asked a few questions and answered a few questions.
No.
So typically this is where some people don't ask questions and they stay incognito, so to speak, but would really be interested in hearing some questions. What's on your mind? If I got you mad with anything that I said here, please share that, because you know this is change, and change is uncomfortable. And the question is are we willing to adapt to what's going on outside the organization? So think of this, where we are now, as a mini strategy for the future of your career, because there's a lot of things going on externally, opportunities or threats. They will be framed as either an opportunity or threat based on your ability to adapt to them. And this is really a strategic plan for where you are as a strategy leader right now. Are you willing to adapt to what's going on externally?